My aunt used $24,600, meant for Grandma's medical care, to fund a luxury trip to Greece. Then I discovered she'd faked the authorization, drained the account, and collected another $13,000 from relatives while pretending she paid for everything herself. I found out my aunt had spent Grandma's medical money while an emergency room nurse was cutting a compression stocking off Grandma's swollen leg. The nurse asked when Grandma had last seen her cardiac rehabilitation therapist. Grandma looked at me, confused, and said the therapist had stopped coming before our trip to Greece. That made no sense. I had transferred $24,600 into the care account 6 weeks earlier, enough to cover 3 months of home therapy, a stair lift, and the copay for Grandma's heart procedure. Then Grandma lowered her voice and asked me a question that made my stomach turn. "Grace, why did Denise say you canceled the therapy?" Grandma asked. My Aunt Denise was standing on the other side of the curtain, wearing the white linen jacket she had bought in Santorini. She immediately said Grandma was confused from dehydration. She also claimed Grandma had begged for one last big vacation and had signed permission to use the money. But Grandma thought the entire trip had cost $1,200, and when I checked the care account from the hospital parking lot, only $1,843 remained. So what had Grandma actually signed? And why had my aunt needed almost $23,000 to take one elderly woman on a trip she barely remembered choosing? I was 34 then, and Grandma Evelyn was 78. My mother died when I was 12, so Grandma had done much more than fill the normal grandmother role. She attended parent-teacher conferences, taught me to drive in her dented Buick, and sent $20 grocery cards to my college dorm even when she was living on a school secretary's pension. Denise was my mother's younger sister. She was 52, charming in the way that made strangers trust her quickly, and permanently offended by the idea that anyone might check her work. She organized family birthdays, remembered every cousin's allergy, and made sure the photographs always showed her in the center. For years, those qualities looked like generosity. It took me much too long to understand that Denise liked being seen as the person who saved everyone, especially when someone else paid for the rescue. Grandma's health crisis began in February. She fainted in the produce section of a grocery store and was diagnosed with severe aortic stenosis. Her cardiologist recommended a valve replacement procedure, followed by 12 weeks of supervised rehabilitation. Medicare would cover most of the procedure, but not everything afterward. Her narrow, split-level house also needed a stair lift because her bedroom and only full bathroom were upstairs. At the first family meeting, the numbers were specific. The procedure copay and medication reserve came to $7,800. The stairlift quote was $6,250. Home cardiac therapy, nursing visits, and transportation would require about $10,000. I had recently received a $31,000 bonus from the software company where I managed payroll systems, so I offered to fund the gaps and let Grandma repay nothing. Denise objected to my handling the account. "I live 12 minutes from Mom," Denise said during the meeting. "Grace lives almost an hour away. It makes sense for me to pay the local bills." That part was true. I lived 54 miles away, and Denise had already been driving Grandma to appointments. To keep the system transparent, I opened a separate checking account in Grandma's name with Denise and me listed as authorized agents under a limited financial power of attorney. The document allowed us to pay medical and home safety expenses. It specifically prohibited gifts, travel, loans, and transfers to ourselves. I deposited $24,600 on March 11th. I also asked the bank to send statements to Grandma's house and electronic alerts to both Denise and me. Denise smiled and called me thorough. 3 days later, the alerts stopped reaching my email. When I asked, Denise said the bank had been doing maintenance. She sent me screenshots showing 3 legitimate payments: $1,950 to the cardiology group, $740 to the pharmacy, and a $500 deposit to the stairlift company. I should have called the bank then. Instead, I was working 60-hour weeks during a systems migration, and Denise supplied just enough proof to keep me calm. The first warning appeared at Easter dinner. My cousin Amber, Denise's 27-year-old daughter, mentioned that a luxury travel company had offered her a discounted photography package in Greece. Amber was trying to become a lifestyle influencer and had been engaged to her boyfriend Cole for 2 years. Denise said they were only daydreaming because the package was still far beyond their budget. Grandma smiled and said she had always wanted to see the blue roofs in Santorini. Everyone treated it as a sweet comment. Denise treated it as an opening. Within a week, she was telling relatives that a short trip might give Grandma something to live for before surgery. I said the cardiologist had not cleared international travel. Denise replied that she was merely exploring options. Then she began sending the family articles about elderly people fulfilling bucket list dreams. On April 2nd, Denise called me and said the procedure had been moved from late April to June because the hospital was waiting on a specialized valve. She said the cardiologist had approved a quiet 5-day trip in May. I asked to speak to the doctor, but Denise said the office had already closed and promised to upload the clearance letter. The letter appeared in our family group chat that evening. It was on the cardiology practice's letterhead and said Grandma could travel if she wore compression stockings, limited walking, and returned 10 days before surgery. I noticed it did not name a destination. I also noticed the signature looked like a typed font, but I told myself medical offices used electronic signatures all the time. I told Denise that none of the care money could be used for travel. "Of course not," Denise said. "Amber found points and I have savings. This is my gift to Mom." Grandma left on May 7th with Denise, Amber, and Cole. The 5-day trip quietly became 11 nights. Their social media photographs showed private transfers, cliffside restaurants, a catamaran, coordinated white outfits, and a suite with a plunge pool. Grandma appeared in perhaps 1 photograph out of 4. In many pictures, she was sitting alone, while Amber and Cole posed nearby. I called Denise on the 3rd day after seeing Grandma's ankles in a photograph. They were visibly swollen. "She is fine," Denise said. "Stop trying to manage everyone from another country." Grandma came home exhausted on May 19th. Denise told me she needed 2 days of rest before visitors. On May 21st, Grandma became short of breath while walking from her kitchen to the living room. Denise drove her to urgent care instead of the hospital. Urgent care sent her by ambulance to the emergency room, where doctors found fluid around her lungs and an infected blister on her heel. That was when the nurse asked about rehabilitation, and Grandma asked why I had canceled it. I stepped into the parking garage and called the bank. The representative confirmed that my email address had been removed from alerts on March 15th through Denise's online login. Because I was still an authorized agent, the representative restored access and sent 90 days of statements. The transactions did not resemble a medical account. There was $8,420 to Aegean Blue Travel, $4,780 to a hotel group, $2,900 to a luxury tour operator, $1,640 to a photographer, $1,320 to an airline seat upgrade service, and $2,175 in ATM withdrawals. The legitimate medical payments totaled only $3,408. I called Denise from my car and asked her to explain each charge. "Mom authorized a family memory," Denise said. "You do not get to control her happiness because you wrote 1 check." I reminded Denise that the limited power of attorney prohibited travel spending. "She signed a separate authorization," Denise replied. "I have it, and so does the bank." 20 minutes later, Denise emailed me a 1-page document. It said Grandma authorized up to $25,000 for a final family journey and understood that medical services might be delayed. Grandma's signature was real. A notary seal appeared below it. For about an hour, I wondered whether I had misunderstood everything. Grandma was competent. If she had knowingly chosen the trip, I could be angry about the risk, but I could not treat her like a child. Then I noticed the date, April 28th. Grandma had spent April 28th at the hospital for a transesophageal echocardiogram. I had texted with her before the procedure. She was sedated from 9:10 that morning until afternoon and groggy for the rest of the day. The authorization claimed it had been signed and notarized at 10:35 a.m. inside Grandma's house. I asked Grandma about the document after her breathing stabilized. I did not show her the full page at first. I showed her only the signature. "That is mine," Grandma said. "Denise brought insurance forms to the hospital. She said one page let her talk to the airline if I needed a wheelchair." I showed Grandma the paragraph above her signature. She read it twice. Then she pressed her lips together and asked me to call the nurse because she felt sick. The next morning, the cardiologist explained that Grandma's procedure would now be delayed at least 3 weeks because the heel infection had to clear. The delay was dangerous but manageable if she received daily monitoring, low-sodium meals, and careful wound treatment. The care company had stopped service because 2 automatic payments had failed. I paid $6,000 from my emergency savings to restart care. Then I stopped arguing with Denise. I began collecting facts. The first setback arrived before I had even organized the bank statements. The stairlift company called to say it was canceling Grandma's installation. Denise had paid only the $500 deposit, then instructed the company to order a custom rail. The remaining $5,750 had been due before fabrication. Because the rail had already been cut to fit Grandma's staircase, the contract made the deposit non-refundable and gave us 5 business days to pay the balance. Denise told the company I had assumed responsibility. She had even forwarded an email that appeared to come from me. The address used my name but ended in a slightly different domain. In the message, I promised payment after Grandma returned from Greece. That fake email showed Denise was not making one impulsive choice during a vacation. She had created a separate identity to keep vendors patient while she emptied the account. I paid the lift balance on a credit card. For the first time in my adult life, I carried a balance I could not clear at the end of the month. Denise later cited that debt as proof that I was financially unstable and should not control Grandma's accounts. She also tried to regain access. The bank called because Denise had submitted Grandma's travel authorization as evidence that she remained entitled to manage the account. She claimed Grandma had revoked me during the trip. Fortunately, the fraud officer noticed the authorization mentioned travel, but did not amend the limited power of attorney. The officer placed a hold and requested an in-person capacity interview with Grandma. Denise arrived at Grandma's house the morning of that appointment and told the caregiver she was taking Grandma to brunch. The caregiver called me because Grandma knew nothing about brunch. By the time I arrived, Denise was standing on the porch insisting that daughters did not need appointments to see their mothers. Grandma opened the screen door and spoke for herself. "You may visit after my bank meeting," Grandma told Denise. "You may not take me anywhere and you may not carry my purse." It was the first boundary Grandma set without me prompting her. Denise stared at her as though illness had made Grandma disobedient rather than vulnerable. At the bank, Grandma explained the trip, the false description of the form, and her intended medical budget. The fraud officer recorded the interview, removed Denise's online access, and flagged every attempt to change contact information. That interview later became important because it captured Grandma's clear memory before Denise could build a story about cognitive decline. My job involved reconstructing payroll fraud, so I approached the family account the same way. I downloaded every statement, preserved the original email headers, and created a timeline. The travel charges began on April 29, one day after Grandma signed the supposed airline form. The cardiology letter had been uploaded on April 2nd, but the hospital confirmed the valve procedure had never been scheduled for April. June had always been the expected month. The medical office also confirmed it had never issued a travel clearance letter. The wording had been copied from a generic online template. The physician's name was misspelled in the document properties. That answered how Denise had gotten Grandma onto the plane. It did not explain why the trip cost so much. Amber supplied that answer accidentally. She posted a video thanking a photographer for capturing her private Mediterranean engagement week. In the background of one clip, I could see a welcome board reading, "Amber and Cole, 11 days of forever." The trip had not been designed around Grandma at all. It was Amber's destination engagement shoot, and Grandma was both the funding source and the sentimental story used to negotiate discounts. I saved the video before Amber deleted it. I also contacted the travel company using Grandma's authorization as her financial agent. The invoice listed 2 premium suites, a couple's photography package, a private engagement dinner, and only 1 accessible room. Grandma's economy airfare had cost $846. Denise and Amber's upgrades, suite, photographs, and excursions accounted for more than 70% of the total. The worst discovery came from my Uncle Peter, my mother's older brother. He called after I asked whether Denise had told him about the account. "Denise said she was paying for the trip herself," Peter said. "She asked each of us to contribute toward your grandmother's medical care because the vacation had emptied Denise's savings. I sent $6,000. My Aunt Laura had sent $4,000. 2 cousins had sent $1,500 each. Denise had collected another $13,000 from relatives after using my $24,600, supposedly to replace medical money. None of it had reached Grandma's care account. Denise had not simply stolen one pool of money. She had charged the vacation to Grandma, portrayed herself as the generous daughter who paid for it, and then collected a second pool of money from the family. I asked the bank to freeze outgoing transactions and met with an elder law attorney named Priya Shah. Priya explained that Grandma could revoke Denise's authority immediately. The false notarization and use of restricted funds could also support civil claims and an elder financial abuse report. Grandma was frightened by the word police. She still loved Denise and worried that Amber would lose her mother. Priya did not pressure her. Instead, she asked Grandma what outcome she wanted. "I want my care paid," Grandma said. "I want Denise to stop telling people I am confused, and I want to hear her explain this while I am in the room." That became our plan. Grandma signed a revocation, moved the remaining money to a new account, and appointed me as sole limited agent. Priya notified the bank and the care providers. We also arranged for Grandma's cardiologist to document that she had decision-making capacity. That detail mattered because Denise had started telling relatives that I was manipulating a sick woman. For 9 days, Denise behaved as if she had won. She posted a long message saying I was jealous because Grandma had chosen to make memories with her. Amber wrote that money could be replaced, but time could not. Several distant relatives told me to stop creating drama before Grandma's procedure. I did not answer publicly. I invited the relatives who had contributed money to a Sunday lunch at Grandma's house. I said Grandma wanted to review her care plan. Denise arrived 40 minutes late with a bouquet and a leather folder. She placed the folder on the dining table and addressed everyone before Grandma could speak. "I have legal proof that Mom approved the trip," Denise said. "Grace is trying to punish me for being the daughter who actually shows up." Priya was sitting beside Grandma, introduced only as a family advisor. I asked Denise to show the authorization. Denise slid forward the notarized page. Priya asked where it had been signed. "At Mom's house," Denise said. "The notary came at 10:30 in the morning." Grandma looked directly at Denise and said, "I was under anesthesia at the hospital at 10:30. You told me I was signing an airline wheelchair form." Denise's face changed, but she recovered quickly. She claimed the date must have been entered incorrectly. That was when Priya placed the hospital log, the original document metadata, and a written statement from the notary on the table. The notary was one of Denise's real estate friends. When Priya contacted her, the woman admitted she had stamped the page 2 days later without seeing Grandma sign because Denise promised Grandma had requested it. The notary had already notified her insurer and surrendered her journal to investigators. Denise then said the entire family had benefited from the trip photographs. Uncle Peter asked where his $6,000 had gone. Aunt Laura asked the same about her $4,000. Denise stared at them as if she had not expected them to compare notes. I connected my laptop to Grandma's television and displayed the account timeline. Each travel charge appeared beside the matching invoice item. Then I showed the family contributions Denise had collected afterward. Finally, I played Amber's engagement video and paused on the welcome board. "The vacation was not for me," Grandma said after the video ended. "I was the decoration that made it easier for you to take my money." Amber began crying and insisted she thought Denise had paid. Cole quietly said Denise had told them Grandma wanted to give Amber an early wedding gift. That claim opened another problem for Denise because the power of attorney explicitly prohibited gifts. Denise pushed back from the table and accused us of ambushing her. Priya calmly handed her the revocation notice, a demand for a complete accounting, and a proposed repayment agreement. The agreement required Denise to return $33,600, the medical money she had diverted, the relatives' contributions she had retained, and the extra care costs caused by the interruption, minus the legitimate medical bills already paid. If Denise signed, transferred $15,000 within 10 days, and secured the balance with a lien on her rental property, Grandma would pursue a civil resolution first. If she refused, Priya was prepared to submit the full file to Adult Protective Services and the district attorney. "You would send your own daughter to prison?" Denise asked Grandma. "No," Grandma replied. "Your choices brought you to this table. I am offering you a way to repair some of them." Denise refused that afternoon. She left with Amber and said we would hear from her lawyer. For 48 hours, I worried that Grandma would lose her nerve. Then Denise's lawyer reviewed the documents and apparently gave her a realistic assessment. Denise signed the repayment agreement on Wednesday. She sold a fishing boat she and her husband rarely used, returned $17,400 immediately, and placed a recorded lien on the rental property for the rest. The money allowed Grandma to receive daily care and install the stairlift before her procedure. Her valve replacement took place on June 27th. There were complications with her blood pressure, and for one terrible night she remained in intensive care. But she recovered. By September, she could walk to the end of her block with a cane and no longer had to stop halfway up the stairs. The consequences did not end with repayment. The state opened an investigation into the false notarization. The notary lost her commission and paid a civil penalty. Denise entered a diversion agreement that required restitution, financial abuse counseling, and 2 years without managing Grandma's money. Priya told us the outcome was less severe than it might have been because Grandma asked the prosecutor to prioritize repayment and protection. Amber canceled her large wedding and married Cole at a courthouse. For months, she blamed me for destroying her plans. Later, bank records showed she had not known where most of the money came from, but she had known Grandma's room was the cheapest and that the trip was centered on her engagement. She eventually apologized to Grandma without asking for forgiveness. Denise and Grandma did not reconcile quickly. They spoke only during supervised family visits for almost a year. Denise kept making the monthly lien payments, sometimes one day before the deadline. She never apologized to me. Her first real apology to Grandma came 14 months later, and Grandma accepted it without restoring trust. The apology was not dramatic. Denise brought no flowers and made no speech. She sat at Grandma's kitchen table and admitted 3 things without adding excuses. Grandma had not understood the cost. The trip had primarily benefited Amber, and Denise had used Grandma's illness to pressure relatives into sending more money. Grandma listened, then asked whether Denise would still be apologizing if Priya had not found the notary. "I do not know," Denise said. That is the part I am most ashamed of. Grandma told her honesty had arrived late, but late honesty was still the only place repair could begin. She allowed Denise to visit without Priya or me present, but never restored financial access, house keys, or authority over appointments. I also had to face my own mistake. I built a transparent account on paper, then ignored the moment the alerts stopped because I was busy and wanted to believe a family member would not exploit a sick woman. Now, every medical account has dual approval, provider direct payments, and alerts that cannot be changed by one person. Grandma jokes that our system has more controls than a bank vault. I tell her that is because a bank vault contains less valuable things. Last Christmas, Grandma gave each grandchild a framed photograph. Mine showed the two of us on her front porch after cardiac rehabilitation graduation. Amber's was not from Santorini. It showed Grandma teaching her to bake when she was 8. Memories do matter, Grandma told us, but they are not more meaningful because they are expensive, and love is not permission to spend someone else's future. Grandma still lives in her own home, with a caregiver 4 mornings a week and me handling the bills. Denise visits twice a month. The relationship is quieter, more careful, and probably more honest than it was before. I sometimes wonder whether I should have recognized Denise's pattern sooner, or whether giving her a civil path was too generous after she risked Grandma's life. But Grandma made the final decision while fully informed, and protecting that decision was the point of everything. So, if a relative used an elderly parent's medical money for a luxury family vacation, forged the purpose of a signed form, and then repaid the money only after being confronted, would you allow that person back into the family under strict boundaries? Or would the betrayal be permanent for you?